Hey, work from homers, Adam Schrader here. We love bringing you this podcast, and thousands of you have proven that it's been helpful for you. But since time and online storage space aren't free, Narration and I wanted to come to you personally to ask for your financial support through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/workfromhomeshow and help support the show. And we appreciate your support at any amount you choose. That's patreon.com/workfromhomeshow. Thanks for your support. Let's get to the show.
Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Work From Home Show. Shout out to all our homies, homeboys, homegirls, home trans, all the work from homers out there. I'm Naresh Fissa with Adam Schrader. Today we have Soman Chainani on the show. He is a #1 New York Times bestselling author of the School for Good and Evil series, which has sold more than 3 million copies. It's been translated into 30 languages across 6 continents. And it was even developed into a film by Netflix. He's going to talk a little bit about that. His new New York Times bestselling book is Rise of the School for Good and Evil. Soman, thank you so much for joining us on the Work From Home Show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about your stories, your characters, the genre that you write in. So tell us, what kind of books do you write? How did you get into writing these books? And how do you come up with your stories and characters?
You know, I spent a long time studying kind of like Disney fairy tales when I was young and sort of watching a lot of them and being kind of disappointed with how good and evil were presented and how sort of one-dimensional both sides were. And I think ultimately I wanted to create a series where there was a lot more balance between the two, where it wasn't a given that the villain was going to die at the end, because that's what I was so used to with Disney, Marvel, Star Wars, Harry Potter. I wanted a more complex view of the two sides.
What would you say, I mean, if someone hasn't read your stories right now, like what is a good kind of basis of kind of what type of story fits what you were doing? Like what kind of stories directed you towards kind of what you're writing today?
I think for me it was the feeling of maybe like the old school fantasy epics where you would start reading them and you didn't know who the good guy and the bad guy was. And that's what my stories are like. Every one of my books features 2 characters and you can't necessarily pin down who the good and evil characters are because I don't tell you off the bat who the villain is. So in the School for Good and Evil, you know, you meet 2 girls and you're sort of shifting because you aren't sure who to root for, who's your sympathy with, because it's constantly changing. It's kind of like a young Game of Thrones where, you know, when you're reading or watching Game of Thrones, you don't know who is good or evil because he doesn't label them as such. So I'm trying to get away from these labels of who's a good person, who's the bad person, and that uniformity of behavior in order to create characters that are more complex. And when you have an entire cast of complex characters, it's very hard for the reader to fall into their old kind of reading patterns.
I completely agree with you. One of the things I didn't like about these children's movies growing up is, like you said, you know how it's going to end. You know who the bad person is, and you know that they're going to end up either dying or getting thrown in prison at the end. And that's why I liked Pocahontas, actually, because the ending was not what I would have expected, at least in the first Pocahontas film. And I was like, wow, that was different. And I was just like 5 years old when I watched it, and I was like, that's different. I like that. And now when I watch movies like that, it doesn't have to be Disney. It could be a rated R movie. But when I watch movies where it's not this feel-good ending, I'm like, I like that a lot better than something that's so predictable.
Absolutely. And I think my books, that's what's made them successful, I think, is that no one can ever tell what the ending is going to be. And the kids get quite sort of worked up. And obviously adults too, because there's a lot of adult readers not knowing what the twist ending is going to be.
Now, do you go into it knowing who the bad person is going to be, or do you kind of start with a premise and go through the writing and see kind of, okay, this person's going to be, you know, based on what I'm writing and the way the story's going, this person's going to be a little bit more on the evil side than the other one. You know, obviously, you know, characters that have depth and are both good and evil are fantastic to have in a story, even though they're not in every story. But kind of how much do the characters change while you're writing them?
I think I don't think of them ever as, heroes or villains or good characters or bad characters. I think it's an evolution as I go along. And I never set out to know what they're going to do. I think I just have to be in the moment when I'm writing and just sort of follow the rabbit down the hole. So they evolve as I write, and I'm always surprised by their behavior. And I think that's why readers are surprised, because there's no way for them to anticipate what's going to happen, because I don't even know when I'm writing it.
I want to talk a little bit about your journey, your career. You went to Harvard. I believe you were an English major or something that had to do with writing while there. Walk us through the journey. So you went to Harvard. How did you end up writing New York Times bestselling books? How did you get your big publishers, your agents? Because you've hit it pretty big, and now Netflix movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think coming out of school, I thought I was going to go the business route, and I interviewed for banks and consulting firms and things like that. And I lasted like a year in one of those jobs before I got fired. And I was always creative.
Where were you working? I'm just curious.
It doesn't exist anymore. It was a small firm that ended up getting bought by Booz Allen, which then got bought by PwC.
So you're in management consulting.
Yeah, management consulting. And so then after that, I thought, okay, let me at least pursue what I love, because clearly the other thing's not working. So I went to film school, came out of film school, had, got signed by an agent pretty quick, was making a living as a screenwriter. And then had the idea for School for Good and Evil, but it was too big for a movie. And I thought, I was getting tired of taking other people's notes and projects falling apart and the usual Hollywood nonsense. And I thought there was an opportunity to control something from start to finish. And so that was irresistible, and ultimately led me to finish the book. And then luckily I knew a producer who was a great, contact, who knew all the publishers. And she served to sort of introduce me to publishers. And that's when sort of the bidding war started.
You made an interesting statement there where you said it was too big for movies, which it hurts me to hear that, because I feel like stories that have depth become what you were saying is too big for movies. And so how do you make a story to where you can still have depth, but it still kind of fits into what the movie creators are wanting?
I mean, I think the important thing is that the story has complexity, and you almost always can only get that if you've developed the story quite deeply. So in my case, writing a book becomes the way to develop the story. If you go straight to a screenplay in a fantasy world, it often doesn't hold up, because you don't have the answer to every single question. So a novel gives you the chance to sort of workshop it in the most deep and intricate way. So that's why I thought it needed to be a novel. I needed to figure out every sort of corner of the universe first.
The Netflix movie, can you talk a little bit about that?
I think it's an opportunity to bring the world of the book to life so that more people can discover the School for Good and Evil universe, and hopefully go to the books. And it's directed by Paul Feig. It has Charlize Theron, Kerry Washington, Lawrence Fishburne, Michelle Yeoh, a huge, huge cast. And it's just kind of like Harry Potter on steroids. So I'm eager to see what people think. It's very bold and edgy and really matches the tone of the books. It's a very faithful adaptation. So I'm excited for people to get a taste of it.
So can you talk a little bit about kind of how you wrote? Were you one of the people who needed a place to go? Were you writing at home? Were you, kind of a mixture of it? Like, how did you, kind of, what's your process there?
I always wrote from home. I can't really write in different places because, I can do it in a coffee shop or, on an airport and stuff, but I just need the comfort of being at home usually, or in a hotel room or something like that. And that's how I've been. I just, tune out the distractions and then enjoy myself. But I think being in the comfort of a space I know often helps. Though I'm very good at writing on airplanes too. I think because it sort of locks you in.
Yeah, nowhere to go. No, a lot of times no internet to distract you. That's definitely there. So you're not one of the people who goes and people watches and writes on the side kind of thing. And how much a day are you writing? Are you like locking yourself in a room for 4 hours a day? Are you kind of doing, a little bit here, a little bit there? Or how do you structure your days to make sure you're able to both do work, but also not get, you know,
Burnt
bored in
out.
the house,
Yeah.
essentially.
It's usually a 2-hour structure or so, where I'll do it and then I'll go take an exercise break to either play tennis or work out, and then I'll come do another 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So usually it ends up being about somewhere between 4 and 5 hours broken up into 2.5 hour blocks.
You talked about how you first kind of got started. How did you decide to, I mean, you had the job, the business went under, you started writing. How did you decide, yeah, I'm going to make money on this? Like, and this is how I'm going to do it. Did you just have enough of a nest egg set aside that you were able to devote this much time to it? Or what gave you the confidence to step out?
I had a day job, so I was tutoring at night. So I was tutoring, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., 7 nights a week. And that's how I made all my money, and it freed me up to write during the day. So there's no way I could have written these books without money coming in that way. I always tell people, if you want to be a good artist, you have to have a day job, because otherwise there's too much pressure on your art. If I was just sitting at home writing, oh my God, I don't know what I would have written. It wouldn't have been good. Way too much pressure on it.
What were you tutoring, out of curiosity?
For the SAT, and honestly, every subject. I was one of those good students in high school, so I could handle math, I could handle science, I could handle English. So I was basically doing every subject. Some families had me there every day, because I could do basically any subject for them.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for today's show. Really appreciate it. Would you mind giving out your website, and if there's anything else you want to promote or anything upcoming, fill in our listeners.
I'm at somanchinani.com. You can find me on Instagram at somanc, Twitter at Soman Chainani, and that's probably the best places to get me. Somanchinani.com is sort of the homepage for all my stuff.
Now, you mentioned, sorry, one more thing. You mentioned how you like to develop the in-depth characters. You don't necessarily know if they're good or evil during it. Is this a one-off book, or is this the start of a series?
This is a start of a twofer, so it's a duology, and it's sort of the prequel before the series begins. So it gives you a new entry point if you want something about two boys instead of two girls, and a sharp, shorter, faster-paced book to begin.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us again. You can check us out at workfromhomeshow.com. That's workfromhomeshow.com. Please leave us a review on your podcast platform. If you have any questions, email us hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's hello@workfromhomeshow.com. And until next week, keep on working from home.